Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome and thank you for joining us here at the Centre for Independent Studies this evening. My name is Simon Cowan. I'm a research fellow here at the CIS and I'm the author of the Foundation Report for TARGET30. TARGET30 is a comprehensive campaign to cut government spending to less than 30%. Our Foundation Report detailed significant challenges facing Australia and our welfare safety net in the future. In that report, we nominated health, welfare and education as the key policy areas for TARGET30. It is timely and important, therefore, that social security and welfare is the focus of this, the first TARGET30 event, and the first TARGET30 research paper, which will be released on Wednesday. Responsibility, or blame if you prefer, for the welfare state extends across both the state and federal governments. Spending on the welfare state accounts for more than 60% of government budgets, increasing from just 25% in 1970-71. And as the baby boomer generation retires and reaches old age, spending on aged care and pensions will grow. Treasury's intergenerational report nominated ageing population as a key driver of expected future budget pressures. There is a need for practical reforms to cut the size of government now, so we can afford a safety net in the future. TARGET30 has received a lot of positive and negative feedback from people such as Andrew Lee. It's important because it's a timely issue for us all, and that brings us to tonight's event and tonight's speaker, Andrew Baker. Since joining the CIS last year, Andrew has focused on the welfare system. He released a paper on the National Disability Insurance Scheme that was both highly regarded and widely commented on. And he is a leading commenter on social security and welfare, having been quoted extensively across both News Corporation and Fairfax publications, as well as frequent appearances on television and radio. Prior to joining the CIS, Andrew was a researcher and advisor for various members of the Australian Senate, and has a Master's in Public Policy and Management, as well as a Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy. Andrew's report, which I'm happy to report you'll receive a special advance copy of tonight, contains pragmatic and workable solutions aimed at reducing welfare and refocusing it so that it focuses on the needy, as well as reducing the overall churn, taxing on the one hand and returning on the other. He has both big bang and small bang reforms. I'm very much looking forward to Andrew's presentation, and I know that you'll find his work and the TARGET30 campaign worthwhile. Without any further ado, I'd like to invite Andrew to come to the stage.
When we talk about the welfare state, we sometimes have this vision of a Robin Hood taking from the undeserving rich and giving to the needy poor. Compared to other countries, Australia's welfare state redistributes wealth quite well, mainly because of aggressive means testing and progressive taxation. However, government is not always taking from Peter to pay Paul. Sometimes, and quite perversely, the government is taxing Peter and then giving the money back to Peter. Take, for example, your typical average income family, 2 parents with 2 kids. Taxes the family pays through wages, GST and excises are typically returned back to them through family tax benefits, childcare benefits and education for the kids. When they grow older, they will receive even more of their taxes back through pension, aged care and subsidised health and hospital care. The process of taking with one hand and giving back with the other is known as tax welfare churn. It accounts for about half of government welfare state spending, or around $158 billion across federal, state and local governments. All up, Australia's government spend around $316 billion a year on the welfare state. It includes all government spending on education, health, income support and housing. As you can see, income support payments and welfare services cost the taxpayers $130 billion a year. This includes spending of, This spending includes age pension, includes family benefits, includes disability support pension, carer payments and unemployment benefits. It also includes spending on residential aged care and disability services. Government spent another $90 billion on health. Around 35 to 40 billion of this is on public and private hospitals. Another 18 billion is spent on primary healthcare services like Medicare. Another 8 to 9 billion is spent on the pharmaceutical benefit scheme. The next big ticket item, education, receives $75 billion in taxpayer money. Of this, about 40 billion is on primary and secondary schooling. Another 25 billion is on tertiary education, and the remaining is spent on other areas including early childhood education. A further $18 billion is spent on housing and community services, which includes public housing. This slide shows total government expenditure on the welfare state has nearly doubled from $167 billion in 2001 to $316 billion in 2011. Welfare spending spiked in 2008-09, partly due to the government's response to the global financial crisis. Partially it was because of the $900 stimulus checks, but also because of the Building the Education Revolution program, which increased capital expenditure on the construction of school halls and duplicating existing infrastructure like libraries. Increased government spending on public housing has also driven growth. To put this spending in perspective, in 2010-11, our $316 billion welfare state accounted for 65% of total government spending. It accounted for more than 70% of $448 billion in government revenue and for more than 88% of the $358 billion in taxation revenue from all levels of government. Looking at government from a purely tax and spend point of view, the primary function of the Australian government, or Australia's governments, is to administer the welfare state. But what is the purpose of all this spending? What's the point of the welfare state? Australia is notable for its highly targeted means-tested welfare payments and its progressive taxation system. This means those on the lowest incomes receive large benefits and pay few taxes, and those on the highest incomes receive few benefits and pay high taxes. If the Australian welfare state is judged on the efficacy with which it taxes Peter to pay Paul, then it is a world leader. However, government is not always masquerading as Robin Hood, and that's where tax welfare churn comes in. Churning typically occurs in one of two ways. The first way is simultaneous churning. As the title suggests, it involves government taxing citizens and then returning the money at the same time in the form of welfare payments and other benefits. Perhaps the most well-known example of this kind of churn is family tax benefits, in particular Family Tax Benefit Part B, which can be paid to families with incomes of $150,000 per year. Childcare benefit and rebate also fall under this category. Primary and secondary school education are key sources of churn because the taxes that parents pay to the government are received back through free education for their kids. Health is another area, as taxes are returned through subsidised. Sorry, microphone's not working. Yep. Health is another area, as taxes are returned through subsidised primary care, pharmaceuticals, and hospital services. The second kind of churn is lifetime churn. Lifetime churn occurs when taxes are paid at one point in time, typically during someone's working life, and are returned when they are not in the workforce, for example through pensions and aged care. This also occurs when younger people receive taxpayer-funded benefits of university education, only to repay the cost of that education as taxpayers later in life. Through the process of lifetime churning, the state is in effect acting as a long-term piggy bank by facilitating lifetime income smoothing, helping people to maintain an adequate disposable income throughout their lives. When and where does churn occur? This table shows that there are high levels of churn in couple families with dependent children who pay $689 in taxes and receive $691 back in benefits. Other households, like couple only and one family and group households, seem to experience relatively large amounts of churn. This contrasts with single parent families, which only pay $229 in taxes and receive $961 in benefits. However, the picture of churn in Australia is much more complex. Over time, and depending on their circumstances in life, people are either net contributors to the state or net beneficiaries. When people are young, they are net beneficiaries, mainly because of the time spent in education. But as they grow older and enter the workforce, they become net taxpayers. When people have children, they once again become beneficiaries, of the state as they begin to receive family tax benefits and their children go to school. After the kids grow up and leave the house, these young households become net taxpayers once again, but only for a short time before they begin to retire. After the age of 65, the situation becomes very different, and the benefits received skyrocket and taxes paid nosedives. In the later years of life, most people are subject to a benefit tsunami. As they become eligible for the age pension, they have increased aged care needs, more health problems, and more taxpayer money is consumed. Once people are 75 years and older, they are receiving $870 per week on average, but only paying $110 in taxes. I think this graph shows why so many people are concerned about the financial implications of an ageing population. Some of you might be thinking, so what? Isn't churn the price we pay for the modern welfare state? After all, the health, education and welfare services we received from the government are one of the reasons we pay taxes to the government. But the point is, we are paying more taxes and the government is spending more of our money when this doesn't have to be the case. It also means that the welfare state is bigger than it has to be, and all the bad things associated with the welfare state are magnified. Tax welfare churn means more inefficiency. It takes at least 70,000 people at a cost of $10 billion a year to administer the federal component of the welfare state. It means higher taxes because the welfare state is bigger than it has to be. It means rent seeking because special interest groups spend time and resources lobbying politicians to expand the welfare state even further. Recent campaigns against the changes to parenting payment and to increase New Start allowance by $50 a week are examples. Churn means paternalism, as governments place rules and conditions on welfare payments telling people what to do and how to do it. It also increases welfare dependency, as more people pay more taxes than they have to and receive more welfare than they need to. This means that people have less resources to look after themselves and that more people have to look to the state to make ends meet. These factors combined, I think, paint a picture that churn is a bad thing, that it should be minimised if possible. The question now is, how do we reduce it? Analyses of the problem of the welfare state typically lead to the conclusion that the tax welfare system is broken and that we need to demolish it and start again. This is the nuclear option to welfare reform. It usually means the reduction or abolition of welfare payments as we know them, combined with substantially reduced taxes. Big bang reforms along these lines typically aim at eliminating effective marginal tax rates, increasing personal responsibility and reducing government expenditure. The solutions are often brilliant and elegant. They include reforms to introduce privatised welfare systems, guaranteed minimum incomes, personal savings accounts, to name but a few. Reforms along these lines have been proposed by the CIS and have been around for decades. The problem is that neither the public nor the political class seem to have an appetite for such big bang reforms that effectively blow up the welfare state and start again. I think, personally, that advocates for small government need to change strategy and adopt a more realistic and pragmatic approach to welfare reform and towards reducing the size of government generally. What I'm going to outline are a series of ad hoc, small bang savings measures that have a better chance of being implemented than a big bang reform program. These suggestions will not have the elegance of other proposals. Put simply, this is the ugly approach to welfare reform in Australia. This year, the Commonwealth spent about $130 billion on social security and welfare payments, which provides incomes for more than 5 million Australians who rely on income support. Around $50 billion a year is dedicated towards the elderly. Around $38 billion of this was spent on the age pension and the remaining $12 billion on aged care. Another $34 billion will be spent on family payments, another $20 billion of that, not including $20 billion on family tax benefits. A further $23 billion will be spent on services and support for disability. $15 billion of this is for the DSP. Any effort to address the size and scope of the welfare estate must address these three key areas. Superannuation is supposed to reduce future pension liabilities, among other things. However, at the very best, superannuation only reduces the number of people receiving a full pension, despite superannuation tax concessions worth $30 billion in foregone revenue. An ineffective superannuation system combined with an ageing population means that we should doubt whether the current arrangements are effective in reducing pension liabilities. With this in mind, there are a number of practical reforms that could stem the growth in government pension liabilities. Raising and aligning the pension and superannuation eligibility ages would be a good start. At present, you can access your superannuation savings when you are 60, which is known as the preservation age, and you can access the age pension when you are 65. These arrangements encourage retirement at 60, living off your superannuation for 5 years, and then moving on to the age pension. This means that the government has foregone revenue from superannuation concessions without the added benefit of reducing government expenditure on pensions. Bringing these two eligibility ages together means more people will spend more of their own money offsetting pension liabilities instead of using superannuation savings to cover the costs of early retirement. From this point, increases in pension eligibility should be linked to increases in life expectancy so that the pension age increases on a regular basis as people live longer. A loophole that allows people to withdraw superannuation savings as a lump sum, reduce their assessable assets, and then claim the pension should also be closed. Currently, when pension eligibility is assessed, the value of the family home is exempt from that test, which means that someone living in a multi-million-dollar mansion is eligible to receive the pension. In turn, this allows people to withdraw their super savings in a lump sum, use that money to buy a new house or renovate their existing house, reduce their assets below the means test, and then at least claim a part pension and the lucrative concession card that comes with it. Requiring people to purchase an annuity with their retirement savings, which would provide a regular income when they're retired, and including the value of the family home in the pension assets tests, are two reforms that would reduce government expenditure and lifetime tax welfare churn. Similarly, with respect to aged care, including the value of the family home is crucial to reducing expenditure in this area. The Productivity Commission's recent report, Caring for Older Australians, recommended just this. Family Tax Benefit Part B is perhaps one of the most famous examples of middle-class welfare in Australia. FTB Part B is a fortnightly payment of up to $144 per child that is payable to families where the primary earner is making $150,000 per year and the secondary earners are making up to $25,000 per year. Given the generous income test for this payment, I think it is uncontroversial to state that the FTB Part B is going to people who are not poor and who do not need the money. This is one area for obvious savings, and for this reason abolishing Family Tax Benefit Part B for a saving of $4.5 billion per year has been a key recommendation of the TARGET30 campaign. While FTB Part B was specifically designed to be paid to stay-at-home mothers, much of the recent growth in the welfare state has been aimed at working mothers through the childcare benefit, childcare rebate and paid parental leave schemes. At present, the childcare benefit is means tested while the childcare rebate is not. This means that millionaires can claim a $7,500 subsidy on their out-of-pocket childcare expenses, whether or not they need it. Means testing this rebate has the potential to save at least tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars per year. New programs for working mothers are another area for future growth in the welfare state. Perhaps emblematic of the potential for extraordinary expenditure is the Coalition's proposed paid parental leave scheme, which will provide mothers with 26 weeks of leave at full replacement wage levels up to a maximum of $150,000 per year or $75,000 over the 26-week payment period. The gross cost of the scheme is $4.3 billion per year. The scheme will be funded through a combination of a new 1.5% levy on companies with a taxable income greater than $5 million and savings from other welfare programs like the baby bonus. By comparison, the current scheme is much less generous because it only provides 18 weeks paid leave at the rate of the national minimum wage. The gross cost of the current scheme is $1.4 billion per year. Clearly, billions could be saved by maintaining the current system of paid parental leave following the election of a coalition government. Alternatively, there are a number of there are a number of self-funding models for paid parental leave that include the use of income contingent loans and tax-effective savings accounts to pay for the sorts of services that the current schemes provide. For the last couple of years, there's been an ongoing campaign to increase unemployment benefits like New Start allowance by $50 per week. This increase has been costed anywhere between $8 billion and $15 billion over a 4-year forward estimates, or by at least $2 billion a year. An increase along these lines is unwarranted. Approximately 60% to 70% of New Start allowance recipients receive payment for less than a year before moving back into the workforce. Any broad-based increase in New Start allowance will result in substantial windfall financial gains for these groups and likely keep more people on welfare for longer. Increasing New Start will increase government expenditure and the overall cost of the welfare state. One possible alternative, albeit a more ambitious one, is to expand the concept of income contingent loans to New Start and also to youth allowance. People on these benefits would take the payment and then be required to repay it once they return to the workforce along the same lines as higher education loans program for tertiary education. Reforms along these lines would entail a greater degree of personal responsibility and reduce government outlays and tax welfare churn as the loans are repaid over time. Excuse me. The disability support pension is not a likely target for reducing tax welfare churn, but at an annual cost of $15 billion per year, it is a serious candidate for further welfare reform. The Productivity Commission estimated that 75% of the economic benefits of the National Disability Insurance Scheme are contingent on DSP reform. The Commission recommended reforming the DSP to align it with the objectives of the NDIS, and the bulk of this reform involves introducing participation and activity test requirements for people on the DSP with a partial capacity to work. Reassessing the current cohort of DSP recipients under the tougher eligibility criteria introduced at the beginning of last year would also reduce the overall number of people on DSP, thereby reducing government expenditure. These are just some of the many possible reforms to income support side of the welfare state that could reduce government expenditure and churn at the same time. However, as outlined earlier, income support and related supports only account for about 40% of the total welfare state spending, and health and education spending account for the remaining 60% and are substantial sources of tax welfare churn. Both of these areas are key targets of the TARGET30 campaign, and in the coming months the CIS will be publishing papers outlining reforms in these sectors. However, given the significant impact that education and health have on churn, I will consider them briefly. In the education sector, immediate savings could be found by abolishing programs of dubious educational benefit, for example, the $74 million a year National School Chaplaincy Program. The $1.2 billion a year School Kids Bonus, which is technically a welfare payment, so it's not included in this spending, also has tenuous links with education and can also be abolished. Savings in the tertiary education sector are more readily available. Andrew Norton of the Grattan Institute identified $3 billion in annual savings in the tertiary education sector by reducing subsidies for degrees that fail a public net benefit test. Degrees with high private benefits that lead to high income careers, for example law or finance, would receive reduced government subsidies, while degrees with high public benefits but low income careers, for example social work, would receive greater public subsidies. These would be worthy reforms to the tertiary education sector that have the additional benefit of reducing tax welfare churn. In the health sector, the broader application of means testing would reduce expenditure across the board. Medicare and the pharmaceutical benefit scheme are not means tested. They provide free or heavily subsidised medical services and drugs for millions of Australians, encouraging their overconsumption and therefore resulting in excessive government expenditure. Introducing high co-payments for wealthy individuals, or introducing means testing to the point where high-income individuals pay for their entire health costs, are two options that would reduce government expenditure and tax welfare churn. This TARGET30 paper, which is being released on Wednesday, is the first in a series of TARGET30 papers that will look at reducing the size of the welfare state from its current 35% of GDP to less than 30% within 10 years. The aim of this campaign is not to propose completely outlandish cuts and savings that have zero chance of being implemented by even the most brave of governments. In this light, I've tried to paint a picture of a number of ad hoc reforms to the welfare state that are not only good in their own right, but would reduce government expenditure and tax welfare churn at the same time. The reforms are not pretty. This is the ugly approach to welfare reform in Australia. But these reforms are essential in ensuring that we do not leave an unbearable financial burden for the next generation of Australians. The danger of a European-style financial crisis in Australia is a real one, and in order to prevent it from happening in Australia, we have to cut spending, cut taxes, and empower people to look after their own welfare. Thank you for listening. I'm more than happy to open the floor to questions.